Hello, welcome back to Hunter Tune. Today I'm working on the Black Betty Mustang. It has been a while since I have worked on this thing or looked at, I look at it all the time, but I haven't really done really anything to it since the last update that I gave you guys. I went through and I put a Volkswagen Corrado radiator in it. This radiator is actually out of the EF Civic, but it was larger than the Honda Civic radiator that I had in here. I was having some issues with this car last year at the track, getting hot, kind of just like every LS build that I've done. It seems like they all just run hot, especially after making 1,000 horsepower down the racetrack. On the return road, it's hot. So it's worried me a little bit. It's kind of made me put this thing on the back burner because I want to try to keep this car as safe as possible, and I want to not be afraid to race it and stay in it all the way down the racetrack. But last year, with the car getting hot, it was pushing water into the overflow, and it almost filled up the overflow. So it concerned me because I didn't want water getting spilt out and then me running it over at 150 some miles an hour. I didn't want that. So I actually added a coolant pressure sensor into the water pump. I have a PRP Philadelphia Racing Products electric water pump on this car, and I added, there's an 1/8 inch port on the top of it, and I put a low dollar 0 to 100 PSI sensor in there. And I actually just swapped my dome pressure plug and I put it on the water pump. So the sensor's right here. Sorry, the lighting's kind of shitty right here, but my dome pressure sensor's right there. It is also a low dollar Motorsports 0 to 100 PSI sensor. But if I run it with the bottle off, that's my plan at least right now, is I'm gonna run the car on the dyno with the bottle off. The solenoids are probably gonna be buzzing away, but probably just turn off the boost controller, because this car still makes, I want to say, like 14 pounds or so on wastegate. So it should still make a good amount of horsepower, and I can monitor the dome or the coolant pressure at low boost and kind of slowly turn it up a little bit and see if it's going to spike my coolant pressure. If it spikes the coolant pressure, we know this car needs a set of head gaskets, or I have to figure out fire ringing it or something like that to keep the head gaskets in it. I know a lot of guys run stock head bolts and stock 4-bolt blocks and stuff like that, but I just seem to have bad luck with these things, keeping them cool and everything like that. And I was actually doing some brainstorming last night, thinking about ways I could keep it cooler, and was actually talking with Jack Roberts. He's got a really fast, squirrel tuned, if you guys check him out. He's got a really fast Mustang. He's had a couple Mustangs and they all been super fast. He's kind of been a inspiration for me on this car, and a guy that's lent a hand here and there when I need it. So I can't thank Jack enough. And Matt Happel, all these guys really helped make this car come together. I remember I put this car together for the JJ to Boss street race up at my racetrack here, and like, I don't know, 2 days before the race or whatever, it was like 1 in the morning. I'm out at the shop, and Sloppy Matt just was awesome enough to reach out, and that was a really cool night that I had. We spent like 2 hours tuning this thing. I was on the phone with him, and it was just really cool. But we really only tuned wide open throttle on this car. And I didn't really care because it's a race car. Fucker ain't idling anyway. So I actually went through yesterday. I got my startup tune dialed in. I got the idle dialed in. Just small stuff like that I neglected on this thing. I mean, I was at the racetrack last year cranking on this thing and firing it up, and it was like coughing until it got to the burnout box, and then I lit it up and it was fine. But I didn't want the thing, I wanted it to idle better and stuff like that. So I got all that done. It's been sitting all winter. I actually checked the injectors, and one of my injectors is about 10% low compared to all the other ones. So I put that injector in cylinder number 3, and I have another set of injectors on the way just as spares to keep around. But like I said, I let it sit all winter with E85, and I kind of just wanted to double check and make sure that they were okay. Cylinder 3 has the low injector, and I went in the Holley and I actually added 10% into that cylinder. So hopefully the injectors will work evenly, even though the one is low. And like I said, I was overfilling the overflow and I was thinking about ways to keep it cool. And one thing that kind of just made me think a lot is if I leave this car idle long enough, it may take an hour or 45 minutes or whatever. It may take a long time. But, and the same thing with my Fox body. I always had cooling issues. And I feel like if you look at a stock Silverado cooling system, they all use an expansion tank. Not a radiator cap with an overflow. They use an expansion tank, which the overflow pretty much happens in the expansion tank. And all the trapped air and everything like that always has a place to go. On something like this, the trapped air gets pushed back into coolant, and when I bled this thing, there's no air in it at all. But like it's plumb full all the way to the top. And just idling, it still trickles out of the overflow. Just because, you know, it just runs a little warm, but at like 190 degrees even, it will trickle past my 18-pound radiator cap into the overflow, just idling. So I don't think the head gaskets are leaking at idle. I really don't. But it just shows like how, I don't really know how to explain it, but I feel like there's something to be said about the expansion tank. I just think that they work better on these cars, and expansion tanks are probably, they probably just work better on these things for some reason. I just think that. Because they came with the factory. The factory put an expansion tank in, and it works really good. You can leave those trucks running 110 degree weather, idling, you know, and they're fine. So, yeah, just something to think about at what I was, you know, brainstorming on. Like for example, one of the LS builds that I've done and I didn't have any cooling issues with was all of my trucks. All of the trucks I've built never had cooling issues. Every Mustang and my Regal didn't have cooling issues, but most of the Mustangs and stuff I've done have all ran hot, and it's a very common thing. You know, I feel like a lot of guys have this issue. So I was thinking about maybe getting an expansion tank on this car eventually, but for now I'm just gonna kind of refine the overflow that I have, because the overflow hose that is coming off the radiator cap goes down and then back up. So it can't really force the coolant back into the cooling system that efficiently. That's how an overflow is supposed to work, is if the coolant does go into the overflow, it's supposed to be able to come back into the cooling system after the vehicle cools back off, and atmosphere pressure will push down, which also, this isn't vented. I need to vent this overflow. So there's coolant in here right now just from idling yesterday. And you can see my hose, it's just a clear hose that I have on here for now, because I was just watching everything, seeing if there's any coolant that was going past, and there was, just idling, like I said. So I think on the dyno, I'm actually gonna mount my overflow up on the hood up here somewhere, so it's really high up, and it can efficiently drain back in to the cooling system, and I'm gonna kind of do some testing with that. A thing that I would want to do is maybe put an expansion tank somewhere over here, because I do have a lot of room on this side of the car. I'd be able to put an expansion tank here, but it's got to be higher than the rest of the engine, so I'd have to have the cap pretty high. That's the only downfall, is I'm trying to do it where it'll work good, and I don't ever have to look at the water. I don't ever have to, you know, put water in it. It'll just work, and if it builds a little too much pressure, it doesn't matter. It'll just do its thing, which an overflow should do that as well. And I feel like I could just kind of refine the overflow that I have, and that should work too. I also just thought of this. I could run the overflow bottle somewhere where it's not going to overflow, you know, under my tires. I could mount it somewhere just in case anything like this were to happen. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this car safe as possible, and water under my tires does not excite me, or oil or anything like that. So I'm trying to just you know, do this as smart as possible and try to think of a way to make the cooling system work better. Back to talking about Jack, he was just mentioning like the temperatures that his car runs at and how he stages the car and how he puts it in the burnout box and stuff like that. And I was always scared that the engine wasn't warmed up enough when I went into the burnout box. I usually pull into the burnout box at about 150 to 170 degrees. And by the time I was on the trans brake on the starting line, the car was, you know, if I was lucky, 170, 180. And then on the return road, it'd be 220, you know, 220, 230. And then I'd shut it off, cool it down, pull back in at 150 or 160, make another pass, and etc. With it being that hot, it always pushed water, you know, no matter what. So, because obviously the more heat that's in the engine, the more coolant's going to get pushed out of the cap. But I don't think it's head gasket, guys, because I purposely ran I ran a lot of boost for like 300 feet when the engine was not at 200 degrees and nothing went in the overflow. So, like I said, I don't think it's coolant pressure from boost. I think it's just because it gets hot and I'm just trying to keep it cool. So, and I've tried water wetter, I've tried water, coolant, I've tried all of it on all these setups and they just all hate me. A big thing on my Fox body that I learned, and I got that car to stay a lot cooler, was I mounted the transmission cooler under the car. I did that on this car right away. Nothing is in front of the radiator. There's not even an intercooler in front of the radiator. So the radiator has a ton of room for airflow, and it might not even run hot on the dyno with the dyno fan, but we'll see what this new radiator is gonna do. I'm just gonna shake it down, you know, put some heat in the trans, check all the fluids again, and I don't know. I just parked it ever since last year. I haven't touched it. It's just been sitting, other than the stuff I mentioned. Yeah, so let's get this thing fired up and get it rolling a little bit and just shake it down a little and see how it goes. I thought the car just hit the boost cut, but I actually lost power to the ECU. One of my fuse block, I think I need to get better connections on it because I wiggle the wire and it comes back. So I'm gonna try to fix it quick and I'll try again. All right guys, so I'm planning on rewiring this car soon. Like I said, I threw this car together for the JJ race. I eventually want to tidy up the wiring a lot better than it is. So, you know, it's just kind of ghetto right now. It really kind of is. I got a bunch of relays on the floor and it's all just self-tappered onto the sheet metal of the floor. And one of the spade terminals actually came loose. Probably just from vibration or whatever. It was honestly barely even touching. So I crimped that back on. Now it's got a good connection. We are going to try again. got you going. So I fixed the issue. The first pull I just did, the log, like the computer froze. So I did another one and I got a data log this time. So we should be good to go there. I have no idea what it made for power. I made a modest 640 horsepower, 700 foot-pounds of torque. So, and I did not rev it very far. I mean, I only did 120 mile an hour. Probably would have made a little more, probably closer to 700 if I stayed in it. This car does boost creep a little bit. Maybe, does it? I can't remember, it's been so long. I want to pull the data log and see what it did, because the second go around, the car was around 190 degree coolant temp. The first hit I did was at 160. So I inspected the overflow, and the overflow did fill up a little bit, but the car was also 190 degrees. So here's what the overflow is looking like right now. It did push some in. I'm just gonna give this a second to cool back off, and I'm gonna look at the data log and see what the dome pressure looked like while I got into it. Not the dome pressure, the coolant pressure. All right guys, so I got a data log, like I was saying, and I went and reviewed it, and I don't know what it is. Every time I use the cable on the laptop with my car, and some other cars too, every time I use the cable that plugs in where the dash does for the Terminator, and it goes to USB, every time I use that, the log gets screwed up, or like the computer freezes or something. So what I've been doing with this car a lot is I got the fuel map dialed in and stuff like that, and once I know it's close, I just log with the dash, and then I pull the log off of the little SD card that's in the 3.5-inch screen. I'm just going to do that on this next run because the log got screwed up and I don't really have good data. So yeah, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna make sure the car's really cooled off this time. I'm probably gonna hit it at 150 or 160 degree coolant temp and see what the coolant pressure looks like. It didn't look like it jumped up a lot from the data I did get, but I want to just make sure. I also wanted to show you guys the level in the overflow right now. The level in the overflow before I'm doing this next run. That's where it's at right now. We'll check it right after this next run. But like I said, I feel like with this thing completely topped off with coolant, you know, that little bit that's going in right now, I don't know if an expansion tank, you know, an expansion tank is meant to expand coolant back and forth. I just don't know how much expansion is okay and what's not, and if I should have this thing completely plumb full with zero air in it, or what I should be doing to alleviate this coolant from pushing in and out. And I did notice, like, even when I ran it low on coolant last year, it still pushed into the overflow. But like I said, the coolant pressure is really going to tell the story. Alright guys, I'm going to show you the level. Just got done doing that dyno run, and when I shut the car off, it was 180 degree coolant temp. So this is the level. This is the level after doing that run. Like I said, 180 degree coolant temp. But I guarantee if I did another one right now, that level would rise. You know, like I said, after about 190 degrees, that thing just starts puking coolant into the overflow. And I did the log on the chip, or on the SD card, and I'm hoping my computer is going to register it, because I'm starting to have some issues with this laptop. on the, wherever it is, there it goes. On this little SD card guy, whenever I insert it, sometimes my computer doesn't register it. So there's just a slot on my computer. And I'm hoping, yes, it registered, hell yeah. All right, let's see if we can pull that data log. Open data log, and we're gonna look in here under save data logs, and we're gonna try to find the most recent one. Is this the one that we just did? Not sure if this is it. Nope, that's definitely not it. Fuck, I gotta find the log. All right guys, I got the data log pulled up and everything looks good. This yellow line down here is my coolant pressure. Like I said, I have it wired into the dome because my dome pressure sensor is right next to the coolant temperature sensor. And I didn't wire separate ones yet. So you can see the dome pressure here at the end of the run, or coolant pressure, is 8 psi. And before the run, right before I whacked it, it was at 8 psi. So it didn't move at all over the course of that run. Like I said, the temperature on that one, let's see what the coolant temp was. So that's battery. We don't care about that. We don't care about oil pressure. Just want to see coolant temp. Okay. Coolant temp and map sensor. So you can see the coolant temp here. Let me try to make this a different color so you can see it. Color. No. Y'all just have to take my word for it. There it is. I gotta recolor some of this stuff so it's easier to understand. But this line right here is my coolant temp. And you can see that it's, you know, the beginning of the run. Granted, this wasn't a very long pull. It was only about 7 seconds or so. 6 seconds, something like that. You can see I'm cruising right here at 163 degrees. And then as I go along, 164. Do my hit, 165, and at the top end of the pull it's still 165 degree coolant temp. So, and then like I said, the coolant pressure was only 8 psi. There wasn't much pressure in there because there wasn't much heat, but that shows that we're not adding pressure into the cooling system with more boost, or when we hit boost, it's not raising the coolant pressure. So that's kind of what I wanted to experiment with and see what it was all doing. That was 185 kPa, so that's probably it was about 12 pounds of boost. And we made, let's see what we made for horsepower. The orange is the new, 639 horse. So it stays pretty flat for power right there, and I think it's doing great, guys. I really do. I showed you the level of the coolant, but I just got to figure out like maybe a better setup for the expanding coolant when it gets hot, because it's gonna get hot, you know, regardless, it's gonna. So I got to figure out a way so that the coolant doesn't overfill the overflow. That's what I'm worried about. And I think one of the big things I can do that's gonna help me a lot is I'm gonna start my run at like 160 degrees. Make sure this fucking thing is cold when I pull it up to the starting line. That's what I've always done with these cars. I always like cool them off in the pit and then I bring them up. But typically I start my burnout at 160 degrees. And by the time the tree drops, the car's at 180. And then, you know, if it's 200 or 210, that fucking overflow is getting full. So I got to figure out a system that I can work with going next track day. I got to figure out like what's going to work good. I got to get this thing on the lift, just go over everything, you know, make sure all the bolts and shit are good. I mean, it seems fine, but I'd like to just do a once over on it, and then obviously I'll hook the CO2 back up and really make some power. But I'll probably shake it down at the track, honestly, on fucking 12 pounds, just because I don't really I'm not trying to go 8s. I've already done that. and I want to go faster, but I want to do it as smart as possible and kind of creep up on it, you know. I don't want to just go and ship it, you know, super fast right away. I'd rather, you know, like I said, shake it down. I could probably run a 10.0 index in this car, and on wastegate pressure, I could probably run a 10.0 index bracket race, and I'd probably have to let out at the top end of the track. But everything seems good with the car. I just gotta tidy up some of the wiring. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really actually pretty excited for this thing to come back out. I just, you know, like I said, I want to do it smart, and I want to figure out this cooling system just for the sake of, like, if the fucker does push water at 30 pounds of boost, whatever, you know, I don't really care. I just don't want it to overfill my overflow and then spew out. That's the concern. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Did get some data logs. I don't even know where my closed loop is at. I kind of just ran through the tune-up real quick from what it had. Closed loop is pulling 4% fuel. Perfect. Fucking perfect. That's awesome. I'm also targeting a richer air fuel this year. Oh no, she's ready to eat. I just gotta tidy up a few things and she'll be ready for the track. I'm excited, and hopefully you guys are too. Yeah, this car's nuts. Wastegate pressure makes fucking 650 horse, you know. I think it made, the last run I pulled up from last year, the most I made on my dyno actually was 1,017, and it was this run right here. So, I mean, this car makes over 1,000 horsepower if I want it to. I just want to do it smart, and, you know, like I said, I don't want to have anything go wrong. When you're going this fast, you can't just carelessly go about a pass. There's thought that needs to go into it. There's, you know, you gotta make sure you're on your A game when you're going 160 miles an hour, which is my goal for this year. I've done 158 in this car. Just want to try to maybe edge out a little faster, cross that 160 barrier. I think that'd be really cool. And then after that, to go to 170 is going to take a lot of work. So I'll probably just park it there, have a reliable 850 car. That's the real goal with this thing, is a reliable 850 at 160 miles an hour. And I think that's a pretty reasonable goal. Yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. Have a great night and a better tomorrow. We'll see you later.